Maya Angelou is carving out a name for herself as a writer. She's a poet, a dramatist, and essayist. Her personal memoir, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, has had high sales and high appreciation around the United States, especially after it was made into a television play. And just as she can hardly be missed on the literary scene, she's equally noticeable in person. She's tall and black, with a sexy walk and a creamy voice. And the way she is, as she discloses in this poem, is also a statement about who she is.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom just 'cause I walk like I got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, just 'cause I laugh, ha, like I got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the hope and the dream of the slave. And so I rise, I rise, I rise.
The thing about Maya Angelou is that she enjoys herself, and she doesn't care who knows it. In fact, she's glad to have people know it.
I love the poem. I love it because there is something in the human breast, in the human spirit, that one poet says hope springs eternal in the human breast. It is hope, it is a resistance to death that I admire in the human spirit. Thomas Wolfe says, loving life, we hate death. And that is so wonderful. It is marvelous, and it exists in the breast, in the spirits of all human beings. It goes across races, tribes, genders, ages, continents, centuries, oceans. It cannot be contained by any people. Rich people cannot keep it from the poor, blacks from the whites, Arabs from the Jews. It is our heritage. The heritage of the human being is this element that says, I will rise. And that's thrilling. All human beings are talented. Every person born is talented. I believe that. I believe that talent is like electricity. We don't understand it, really. We know it, we use it, we harness it sometimes, but we don't understand it. You can plug into electricity, keep a heart pump going, light up a cathedral or a synagogue. You can do wondrous things, or you can electrocute a person in a chair. Electricity makes no judgment. Electricity is simply there. It says, if you want to use me well, constructively, do so. If you want to abuse me, that is your business. Well, talent is like that, and every human being born has talent, you see? And some of us are overwhelmed by the society in which we live, or by our families, or the condition of our births, you see, and so do not, or unfortunately, often by teachers who say that the talented quote, the talented or the elite, end quote. You are not one of those. So people don't get a chance to hone this thing that is born to them as surely as skin.
But you stood out from the crowd beginning at a very early age, and it was for a variety of reasons.
Well, I kind of stood out because one of the reasons was the crowd didn't accept me. That was one reason. So I was sort of stood out as a pariah almost. My survival of the conditions of discrimination and bias on many levels, not just race, but I meant even within my community. My survival can be credited to art, to literature, almost directly. Well, my family and literature.
Well, when you say your family, you're talking about, well, not your parents for the first few years.
No, I was thinking of my grandmother, my brother, and my uncle for the first few years, and a woman in the town in which I grew up, Mrs. Flowers, who encouraged me to read.
Rose T. Flowers.
Well, that's according to a rewrite in a television movie made on my book. The woman's name was Mrs. Beulah Flowers, and she was a great lady and the mother of the leading civil rights lawyer in Arkansas, still there, and the leading black doctor with whom I had dinner in April. She was a great woman, and she somehow had connections in the white school in my little town. And she used to bring me books. I read all the books in the black library, or the library of the black school.
But she thought you should have a sense of self, a sense of pride, a sense of being very glad of being who you were and what you were.
Yes, and she thought I would be able to achieve a sense of self if I would read. And she encouraged me to speak. I was a volunteer mute for a number of years, and I simply could not.
Let's pause there and talk about it. A volunteer mute, that means to say you made a decision not to say anything, and you kept your mouth shut for years. Well, I think people who are listening to us will want to hear more about that and why you did it and how it ended.
Well, at 7.5, I was raped, and I said so. I mean, after pressure from my brother, who I loved a lot, I named the man. The man was subsequently killed. I mean, almost immediately. And I believed that because I had spoken, the man was dead. And it was suggested that he was kicked to death. I thought that my saying his name directly caused his being killed, and I guess it is so. But I just decided I would never speak. I couldn't. My words had such... I was almost 8 by that time, and I thought that my words had such power that they could get people killed. People could stop living. At 8 years old, you really don't know.
Well, no, but it's true. Words do have enormous power, and even though what happened to you was an extraordinary incident and doesn't happen to many people, still we know that words are responsible for wars. So in a way, it was maybe an unfortunate, but a very apt preparation for the life of a writer.
Well, it's a terrible crucible. No more terrible than other people's, but of course one's own distinct one is because one is so close to it.
Well, look, you go out in the street, you know what people are doing nowadays. Do you know? I'm sure you see. What do people fight about nowadays? They fight about what somebody said to them.
Yes.
You called me a name.
Yes. Words are things, there's no question. Well, I found I could talk to my brother, but somehow that was because I figured out I loved him so much that my words couldn't hurt him, but they might hurt almost anyone else. And aberrations are curious things. That is to say, they grow like fungi. Anyone who is crazy enough to play as if he or she is crazy is crazy. So, and it continues to grow. After a while, it became syncretized. I no longer knew why I didn't speak. I just didn't speak.
Well, if you went to the dentist, for instance, would you say, ouch?
Probably not.
That much commitment to the silence. And how did you come out of it?
Well, that same Mrs. Flowers used to read to me, and she read poetry. And I had memorized by then large sections of Shakespeare, Paul Laurence Dunbar, County Cullen, Langston Hughes. I had memorized portions of Charles Dickens because I had nothing else to do, and I loved to memorize things. And Mrs. Flowers told me that poetry was music written for the human voice, and that I must speak it. To really understand it, I must put it on my tongue and use my lips to form the words.
So they weren't your words?
No, they weren't mine, but I loved them. And I began under the bed. I mean, we had the high country beds, you know, and I used to crawl under the bed and sit way back against the wall and read Poe. And I loved Edgar Allan Poe. My brother and I called him Eep. And so I started reading Poe aloud and Paul Laurence Dunbar aloud. And then I would try with my brother. And finally, it was poetry alone that lured my voice out of its hidden place.
I still think it was an extraordinary preparation. People say that artists have richer inner lives, and I can't think of how to impose an inner life more forcibly than what you did to yourself.
Well, I sure didn't know that that's what I was
Sure.
doing.
Yeah, of course not. But what about music during that period? Now, you're a very musical person.
Yes, I loved it. I would love to listen in the church, you know. I love church music, Black American church music in particular. And occasionally we would listen to the radio. My grandmother was very devout, so we listened to a group called Wings Over Jordan that came on every Sunday morning as we were polishing our shoes for church. And sometimes in the evening, my grandmother would listen to Gabriel Heater and Lowell Thomas. Well, sometimes we would just get the tail end of one of the worldly music programs, and one could hear Ella Fitzgerald singing, "A tisket, a tasker," you know, and all those. Oh, I loved them. So I loved music.
But didn't you want to let go and do it?
Sing? Oh, no. Oh, no. It was years before I sang. Oh, no.
You thought that was too much, or beyond you, or a sacrilege, or what?
No, I simply couldn't. I mean, I could not. I couldn't. My grandmother sang, and I loved the music. My grandmother was mother of the church, and every Sunday she sang. But it never occurred to me that I would ever sing in public. Years later, of course, I made my living as a singer. But I listened and I learned. So I learned all the songs, you know, all the long meter hymns, the Dr. Watts, the gospel songs, the spirituals, the dirges, you know.
And today you're less inhibited about mixing speech and singing than most people are.
Absolutely. They sound alike to me. I mean, I don't see where the music stops anymore.
When did you first start writing for publication?
In late 50s, I had my first work published, short stories.
Where was that?
In the United States, in little magazines, and then in Cuba, interestingly enough. And then in Egypt and in Ghana.
In literary quarterlies, that
Yes,
sort
in
of thing.
quarterlies and in magazines and in newspapers. I became a journalist. I became the feature editor for the African Review, which was a West African journal, an economic journal, interestingly enough. But I put a little art in, I hope.
Did you at that time, well, what did you want to do? What were you aiming at? Did you want to just go on writing, be a better and better poet
Yes.
and short story writer?
I wanted then to be a poet and a playwright. I really love poetry. It remains my first love. All sorts, rhymed, rhythmed, tempoed, free form. I just love it. I sense myself when I read other people's poetry. I read my own if it's okay, if it's decent. I mean, acceptable. I mean, good.
To you?
To me. At that time, I wanted to be a poet and playwright. I still want to be a poet.
You don't think you are one yet?
Oh, you achieve it occasionally in 2 lines, and then the rest
Slips away.
Then it slips away, and that's the best you can do.
Who do you measure yourself against as a writer, and whom do you... Nobody?
Nobody. No, not at all. There are many writers who please me, who teach me, who encourage. I mean, by reading their works, I'm enlightened and brightened and all that. But they are no matches for me, and I'm no match for them. We're all different. I measure myself against myself. When I don't hit it, when I don't achieve what I set out to achieve, I'm disappointed in myself. When I'm writing, I have the highest level of my art in mind. That's what I have in mind. To write that sentence, whether in prose, which sings, to write that line in poetry, which contains, that's what I have in mind. It's said by Hawthorne that easy reading is damned hard writing, and that's a truth, more than a fact. It's very hard to write it so that it seems to just slip into the people's minds when they're reading.
I wanted to ask you, who are you writing for? Do you have an individual in mind that you're thinking of whose ear you're speaking into, or is there a group, or is it just anybody? Is it yourself, perhaps?
Well, that's what I was really trying to answer that. When I set out to write, the subject matter might be decided upon because of a group or because of a person. Something may have motivated me.
Well, I may be the editor of a magazine. I call you up and say, hey, I want an article on such and such.
That's right.
Or a poem.
That's right. Then when I start to work on that subject, it's just me and my craft and my art. When I finish, the person who, say it is a magazine publisher, who in some years ago, I was asked to write a piece on someone, on a certain circumstance. I worked on it for about a month, unrelenting, and turned it in, and the publisher said that wasn't what he was looking for. I wrote a tone poem on the subject. I couldn't do otherwise. The subject called for that. He asked me to make changes. I said I wouldn't. I'll take my work back. That is what I meant. That is all there was in that subject that I could write. Another writer could have come along and written a factual piece. Another could have done an adventurous piece. That's not what I found in the subject.
Yeah. Do you accept the theory that while being black and female was a very difficult way to start off in life, especially as an artist, that having achieved the skills that you now have, they can be advantages?
Oh, I think being black is a great advantage. I think being female is a great advantage. That's because I enjoy both. If I were white and male, I would hope to think that those two circumstances were advantageous. I would hope so. I like myself.
Any white male who said that nowadays would be very severely criticized.
That's a pity.
Yeah.
And the pity stems from the fact that the white male has oftentimes been the greatest of the oppressors. Now, so in order not to be that, not to have to say that, one would have to not to be that. You know what I'm saying is, if a white male today saw and admitted the history and did something to change it, he would like himself a hell of a lot more. And he would say, I'm happy to be who I am because I know what I'm doing about the injustices and imbalances. You see, it is awful, it is crippling for any human being to dislike himself or herself. It shouldn't happen. You can even dislike your action and pity the madness that made you act a certain way and set about to do something about it, but not yourself. You can't dislike yourself. I mean, and in the last act of Hamlet, Laertes is arranged to have this duel, uneven duel, as it were, with Hamlet, because the spears, the swords are poison. Right. Well, Hamlet goes to Laertes, and to paraphrase, he said, Laertes, you accuse me of having killed your father, and you accuse me of having run your sister mad Ophelia to the point where she committed suicide. All right, say I did those things. Can you see that that was madness and not Hamlet? You and I have a friendship. Why don't you join with me and help me fight the madness as a third entity? That's a wonderful advice. Of course, Laertes didn't take it, but I mean, the advice is wonderful. When a person has either himself or herself or collectively committed offenses against human beings, the first thing one should do is see that it was madness, utter madness. Only a mad person would kill himself, which is your brother or sister.
Part of you.
Yes. So that is madness. Now then, when the person says, that is madness, not me, it is something that attacked me and is attaching itself to me, I want to be free of it, then you can solicit aid.
What kind of compliment pleases you, satisfies you, makes you feel as though you've accomplished something?
All right. A few days ago, I did a book signing at one of the largest stores in Los Angeles. And there were about 20 authors situated on the floor in the book department. So many people came to see me that they had to move me from that place to another.
Like a mass...
No, wait, just a minute. Sorry. There were people who had come from Watts and Compton.
Well, black people... Black neighborhoods, I'm sorry.
Black neighborhoods. People who had never been to Century City before, to the area in which this book signing took place. People brought their children, 4 and 5 children, so that they could meet me and shake hands with me, so that I could touch them. People brought books that were dog-eared, literally. I mean, they're books that started out being an inch thick. By the time they had passed it around the families and friends, the books were on the edges almost 2 inches thick. Old white people came from nursing homes who had to be brought. Young white boys with long hair and beards and bands around their heads were there. A large group of Asian people were there. Now that was, to me, it humbles me that my work and myself are inspirations, encouragements to human beings. That's the great compliment and the great responsibility.
You want to reach people who might not be reading at all otherwise, who aren't considered book readers, who don't think of themselves as readers.
That's right. That's why it's so important to write well, so that easy reading is damned hard writing. But that's true the other way around. Easy writing is awfully hard reading. I don't want to write that kind of stuff. I don't. And I don't want to write dust-catching masterpieces. I want my work in use. I love to see the people holding my books all dog-eared, and it's a great compliment.
So Maya Angelou sees her blackness and her femaleness as opportunities, in life as in literature. This is Stephen Banker in Los Angeles.